can see a number of tired faces now, and I am the last speaker. And but before I begin my presentation, I would like to thank Dr. Kumar for calling me and giving this topic on Africa. As you all know, Africa means I have been listening all the papers during last 2 days, and only once or twice I saw means some of you, one or two person talked about Africa. So this itself shows that what is the priority of India's foreign policy. This seminar is on India's foreign policy, and Africa's priority, the least priority region is Africa. As you know that this is the year when Mahatma Gandhi returned back from South Africa. So we means 100 years, we have completed 100 years of return of Mahatma Gandhi from South Africa, the great Pravasi. Similarly, last year we completed 50 years of ITEC partnership between India and Africa. So what I mean to say that relationship between India and Africa is not new. It's a very old relationship. But now we are living in a world of globalization, which gives us opportunity to integrate, but there are a number of contradictions are also there, like intensity and the integration is not uniform. This needs some support to get integration, get integrated. We are more integrated towards big powers like USA, like China. We are influenced by magnetic field of these big powers. We are also hyphenated, our foreign policy is also hyphenated to our South Asian or subcontinental dilemma. So, because of this, regions like Africa and Latin America are missing out from India's foreign policy making. But when we see during, before I come to the main topic briefly, that to trace the contours of India's foreign policy towards Africa, I would like to throw some brief light on how Africa is important for India and how India is important for Africa, and what are the areas of convergences, means like how they are mutually interdependent. First, when you talk about why Africa is important for India, we have to know about Africa. I don't know how many of you are aware that Africa has 55 countries, and number also counts in international politics, particularly now when we are also talking about reforming global governance, security architect. Africa's size is 10 times than that of India, and population less than India. So we can see that the density of Africa is very less. It is endowed with a lot of resources, hydrocarbon resources, mineral resources. These all are some points which gives you a fair idea that how Africa is important. Moreover, we have been talking about lookist, actist, but when we see just across Indian Ocean, Africa is located. So if we see Indian Ocean as an integrating factor, Africa becomes one of the proximate continent for India. So if someone tell me that although this Africa, there is a topic on Africa, but I think this topic should be considered in earlier session, like fifth session, which is known as extended neighborhood, rather than Africa, India and world. I rather see Africa as India's extended neighborhood rather than as a part of world, because now Indian Ocean has become one of the integrating factors. You read books of modern Kaplan, you read books of even C. Raja Mohan, they all have highlighted as to how Indian Ocean is going to become an integrating factor, and Africa's position is just near to just that side of Indian Ocean. So these are some points, means like we teachers are used to take long lectures, but I won't bore you. I can see that. So I'll just briefly reflect that some points. Similarly, how India is important for Africa. How India is important for Africa. When we see this point, Africa needs India on various issues. Like one of the issues is capacity building. Like when prior to coming here, I was there in Ethiopia. I taught 2 years there, and they were giving more emphasis on training and learning about governance and other things. They had a number of courses on good governance, and these all issues which are somehow related to India's democracy, and we can share, India can share these all experiences of good governance or democratic experiences, election and other issues. So capacity building can be one of the area where India can support Africa. Similarly, as I have already pointed out, that there have been discussion about reforming global governance. Like you read book of Joseph Stiglitz, he talks about discontent of globalization, or he also talks about how you can make globalization work. In these writings, although it's written by an American author, he argues that now these all International Monetary System, IMF, World Bank, WTO, these all need a big revamping, and in this process also we can Africa and India can cooperate. Another issue which yesterday Anil sir raised about resource and energy. There is also great complementarity about in the field of resource and energy, like in hydrocarbon field. Now India is importing roughly 15% of its hydrocarbon from Africa. There are also new areas in energy sector, like nuclear energy. Namibia and Niger, they have a huge uranium resources. We all know that for our nuclear reactors we need that. Similarly, in trade, there is huge potential. Even though Africa is not discussed more, you will be surprised to know that in last 10 to 20 years, Indo-Africa trade grown many folds. Like in 2001, it was between 2001 to 2007, from $6 billion to $30 billion. Last year, it reached to $70 billion. In 2015, it was generally predictions are there, it may reach to $100 billion. Some even argue that by 2020, Indo-Africa trade may touch $100 billion, $200 billion. So these are the projections. Even if Africa is not given more emphasis, we have been mainly guided by magnetic field of big powers, and we have been deliberating more about that. Indo-Africa trade is growing very fast. So similarly, investment. Foreign direct investment is another area where you can see that complementarity is there. India has been investing just like $5 billion, and Mauritius and is one of the major investors in India. So if you explain this political economy of Indo-Africa relationship, you can see that these things are some complementarity are there. Similarly, in geopolitics, you all read about sea lanes of communication, maritime Silk Route, and you might be knowing that when you say Indian Ocean, a number of countries are there from western side, which are coastal countries, that those all are from African countries. So in a large, and when our trade is growing towards west, like when you see from South-South cooperation perspective, when our trade is going to grow in Africa and Latin America, that area is going to also become very important. So strategic cooperation in maritime and some other sessions that terrorism issue was discussed, like Boko Haram and then India, both are Nigeria to India, we all are facing similar kind of problem. Health is yet another issue which is there, which from Africa perspective is very important. Even day before yesterday, I was going through one news which quotes that WHO requires Indian scientists or Indian doctors. They are going to Africa for training them to fight Ebola. Similarly, in Algeria, foot-mouth disease vaccine, malaria vaccine, a number of things are there related to health-related cooperation where Africa and India's interest converges. Having discussed these all converging dimensions, I would like to now discuss, because this is also a students gathering, briefly I would like to give a trend analysis of changing contours of India's foreign policy towards Africa. As a student of African study, what I noticed during Nehruvian period, as you all know, India's Africa relation was based on romantic idealism, which lasted until 1962. But there was no more content into that cooperation. Later on, during Indira Gandhi period, it just reversed. It got reversed and it became highly realistic, particularly in economic sense. And even Indian were generally termed as exploiter. You all know Uganda's Idi Amin's case. So these reached to that extreme. Rajiv Gandhi somehow tried to balance it. He started some Africa Fund in 1986. So that balancing act was going on. As a student of African study, I just feel that 90s was a confused phase in India's foreign policy towards Africa. There was no big initiative was taken. We all were running about that Euro-Atlantis direction. We all are running towards America and other Western countries. So there was a confused phase until Vajpayee regime, when again new big things were started. Particularly, he bring into some pragmatism in India's foreign policy towards Africa, particularly on the issue of recognition of Western Morocco. And then after that, Focus Africa initiative was started at regional level. Then Team 9 initiative was started in 2000-2004. So you can see that some regional level of cooperation was there. But after that, things changed, and it resulted into Indo-Africa Summit Forum 2008 first, and then 2011 Indo-Africa Summit Forum 2. And there, in these summits, which is generally known as new framework of cooperation, new areas were identified. There was Delhi Declaration, and then supporting documents which lays down foundation of new beginning of Indo-Africa relationship. And that was consolidated in Addis in 2011 in second Indo-Africa Summit Forum. But after that again UPA 2 phase, you see that there is a very means that intensity was not maintained. But still, I told you that still trade is growing, investment is growing. There are some positive parameters you can see in Indo-Africa relationship. So these are some things means on policy level, track 1 level happening from between Indo-Africa relationship during last 10-15 years. So after having discussed these all things, these all are on, I can again summarize that what are the recent trend of Indo-Africa relationship. Like I see that the cooperation is multi-layered. First, as I have already pointed out, Indo-Africa Summit Forum 1 and 2, these all are examples of continental level cooperation. Then you have also regional level cooperation. Means India has been developing its relationship with different regional organizations like SADC, COMESA, ECOWAS. Then also multi-layered and multilateral and plurilateral cooperation on various forums like IBSA, BRICS. Even in BRICS you have one country from Africa, G77. In Doha developmental round you have another G77, G33. So that multilateral and plurilateral means on different issues there are various formations are taking place. So these are some of recent trends which I can see. At bilateral level also India has a relationship with Nigeria, India's relationship with Algeria, Senegal. India is the largest trading partner of Senegal, Tanzania, Mauritius. These are some countries with whom India's relationship is going in a good direction. But again I see that on bilateral level a lot of has to be done. So after discussing these all things, I would like to conclude by saying again we all discussed about realists and also we discussed about liberals. I would like to quote Alexander Wendt, which is social constructivist, who argues that interaction and intensity between different nation states matters. And what I feel that intensity, frequency and density of interaction between India and Africa is not much. So we have to look into that direction so that we can interact more. Higher will be the interaction, higher will be the understanding. So we have to, from bird eye view, we have to go to worm eye view. We have to, bilaterally we have to know each and every country and we have to develop relationship. And from focus Africa to act Africa and make in Africa. This can be one of the another suggestion of it. Another thing is we can leverage the India soft power appeal, which was discussed by Liaquat sir in length. And lastly, the good intent of government should be supported by good content, and good content, rich content of private sector should be supported by good intent. Thank you.
So I have a question for Dr. Liaquat Khan. Sir, in 1977, there was a commission which was constituted by UNESCO. It was called as the McBride Commission. And McBride Commission's role was to come up with a report, and they eventually came up with a report in 1980. The report was called Many Voices, One World. And it was related to the New World Information Communication Order. My question today, sir, is that in 1984, the United States withdrew its UNESCO membership. And in 1985, the United Kingdom withdrew its UNESCO membership. Of course, they joined later. But is there a possibility of a resurgence of NWICO in the present context, how we share information across the globe? And my name is Devang Chaturvedi. I'm a faculty at School of Communication.
So I have two questions. The first one is for Professor Liaquat Khan. So when you talk about Indian diaspora and soft power, if you look at Indian diaspora, when they leave the country, essentially they leave their Indianness there too. In the sense that they might take their culture with them, but when they do negotiate, when they do get to positions of power in other countries, they take on the interests of those countries rather than ours. If you take things like mini Indias, those are just taken as little enclaves that happen in any region whatsoever whenever people move from one to another. And there's also a general movement to disassociate themselves from their roots. So if you look at Southeast Asia, for example, in Indonesia, there was a huge movement that went around that said that no, these temples are Hindu, but Hinduism came from here, it did not start from India. Like whether or not historically that's accurate is a different matter altogether, but that movement is there. The second question I have could also be answered by Ambassador Sood. It's about social media and diplomacy. And social media, in a sense, has eroded boundaries. So if you look at things like Twitter, that have put people in direct contact with each other, India is quite backward in that sense. I mean, apart from our Prime Minister, who's made himself very famous over social media, what are your thoughts on how these two can overlap? And do you think that India should use this facility better?
My question is Dr. Khan. When we look at countries that use culture and narratives to create what we would call soft power, do you think this could be in a way just a euphemism for propaganda?
Okay, you want to ask that?
My question is to Professor Pranav. My name is Manipal. So you ended with speaking about good content and intent. Now, China's engagement in Africa, a few refer to it as neocolonialism. So, in that sense, how is India's engagement in Africa different from that of China?
Good afternoon. So my question is for Dr. Liaquat Khan. My name is Arsh and I'm a second year student here at the Department of Geopolitics. So when you speak about Indian diaspora celebrating Indian festivals outside, don't you think sometimes it might lead to overt problems? Like recently when the controversy started with the Chhat Puja in US in the Potomac Banks, or even the entire idea of the Super Bowl advertisement that Coca-Cola came up with, America is beautiful, and the idea that a portrayal of a non-white America basically. So when a certain external culture becomes a little too dominant outside, do you think it, like the reflection would be more negative than positive there? So although it's more of a comment, but what would be your take on that?
Vineet Krishnan, research assistant in the department. First, quickly to Pranav sir. So, we talked about reactive Indian foreign policy yesterday quite a bit. India and Africa, and this policy towards Africa, would you term that also, in a sense, is reactive, considering the new engagement from all parts of the world? And then, quickly a comment on Liaquat sir's presentation. So soft power is an explanation of what's happening, of why certain phenomena are happening in IR. I can take it, definitely holds merit. But however, the merit of the concept I feel lies in the fact as to how open-ended it is. Pretty much like a sponge. Can take in different things and keep adding to it. The second you try to operationalize on soft power, this very open-ended nature of it, I feel causes a big problem. I feel that institutions like ICCR, AIR, BD, ICWA, Indian diplomats and embassies and consulates all around the world are doing what soft power kind of talks about as it is, even without the conceptualization being there. But once you get into that conceptual muddle, there is definitely a fall through of that impacting on the government a lot more, and that can not contrary to having positive effects, can sometimes have very negative effects as well. For example, I was in Australia on a scholarship from Manipal a few years ago, and that was the time when all those attacks on Indian community people in Australia was happening in 2009. And the feeling there, I was talking to a lot of my friends there, and they were saying that a large part of why this is happening is because they feel that Indians and even the Chinese hang around in cliques, hang around in their own small little groups where they're comfortable and do not really mingle. And there is a kind of negative association as a result in the Australian populist minds. And still you have had our Prime Minister going there, wooing the Australian Indian community, and that can sometimes have negative results. Further, if the kind of civilizational rhetoric we're going to play up would look something like Brahmastra equals nuclear weapons, then such a great scientific tradition and progress that we're making, won't we be looking like fools in the international community, playing up such sort of result?
My name is Abhinav Datta and I'm from Department of Geopolitics. So my question is for Professor Liaquat Khan. Sir, when we talk about soft power, we try to propagate certain ideas and to create some kind of cultural attraction and ideological appeal. I was trying to go through some of the criticism that soft power goes through, and because soft power has always consists of some language, there are certain means of communication, and be it music or be it films or visual art, it has a representational force behind it. So do you think soft power is really that soft? I just want to know, could you please highlight some of the criticisms that soft power faces, this new concept of soft power?
My name is Pavan. I'm a master student here at the Department of Geopolitics. Question is an extension of what Vineet is just talking about to Professor Khan. When you talk about soft power, it's essentially, like you mentioned, it's culture, technology, diaspora. So it's essentially everything that hard power is not. So there again lies the risk. So Tharu talks about how soft power is effective only when you have hard power. And that's something we saw in the first decade after independence when, we didn't speak softly and we didn't carry anything at all in our hand. So that's when we faced the humiliating defeat with the Chinese. So is it just a theorizing concept that the West has come up with to explain a certain phenomenon, or is it something that actually exists? My second question is to Dr. Kumar. So you started your presentation with how Africa gets very little importance when you talk about foreign policy in India. So that's how we just end up about talking about the Chinese presence in Africa or oil and such. So are we focusing on other resources in Africa? For example, what's the potential for trading in biofuels in West Africa? Are we exploring such avenues? Thank you.
One question, why is Africa suffering such a disaster?
That's it?
First, as far as question of India versus China model of engagement in Africa, as we can see that in the past, whenever a lot of issues are there, a lot of engagement of China that led to a conflict kind of situation in Africa. Like one example I can give you. There was a railway line, Tazara railway line, it's called Tanzania and Zambia. In that region, after that, Zambia's president went on record by saying that it has created a new problem in Africa. As far as India's model of engagement in Africa is concerned, this means it's their local resources, local human resources are used. Even on, if you go on Ministry of Foreign Affairs website, you will see that 3/4 of human resources used in Indian investment there, they all are locals. But in Chinese investment, they also more engagement is of Chinese people. So these all are just like, it's a link with their domestic economy, more India's model. So I think it's more sustainable than sustained model of engagement in China. Second question was related to whether it's a reactive. When you see the engagement of India and Africa, it's not new. It started way back. I have already given an example. But recent, when you say Indo-Africa summit and these all. This seems to be little bit reactive to Chinese inroads to Africa. I believe question biofuel, I don't think that big prospect is there now because it has become triggered a new debate of energy security versus food security. On biofuel issue, we have more prospect of cooperation with Brazil. But yes, in South Africa there are some technology which converts coal to energy. That technology share is one of the issue of cooperation. As far as your question, I don't think it's a disaster. A lot of